I never imagined a stranger would know the sound of my footsteps better than my wife did. But that was before Anna arrived with her black canvas bag and clipped accent. A woman recommended by the neighbor after my own back gave out and I could no longer carry laundry baskets up the narrow stairs of our clapboard house in Poughkeepsie. A house that smelled faintly of mildew no matter how many candles my wife burned. Evelyn, my wife, taught high school English and came home each day with chalk on her sleeves and the tired look of someone who had spent all her words on teenagers. And by the time she dropped her satchel on the counter, the last thing she wanted was to hear my voice reminding her that the gutters needed cleaning or the spare room needed dusting. So hiring a housekeeper was her idea, and she was the one who found Anna. But she never saw how the small routines became something else. How sweeping turned into conversation. How a rag in her hand felt more intimate than a hand pressed to my shoulder. The first time I noticed Anna differently was stupid, an accident. The kind of thing that shouldn't stick. She was kneeling in the hallway wiping the floorboards and her sleeve slid down to reveal a thin bracelet made of knotted thread, the kind of thing children braid at summer camp. And I asked if it was from her daughter, and she shook her head, smiling faintly, and said no. From her sister in Veracruz. She always wore it when she was far from home so she wouldn't forget where she belonged, and something in the way she said belonged cracked open a silence I had been carrying for years. Evelyn and I had been married 23 years. The kind of number that sounds solid when you say it out loud. But inside those years were hairline fractures, the missed anniversaries, the bitterness left after failed attempts to conceive, the way we stopped touching each other not out of anger but because the habit fell away like old paint, and when Anna moved through our house humming tunelessly while she folded towels, I realized I had memorized the sound of a woman breathing near me. Something I had not done with Evelyn in a decade. I tried to ignore it, told myself she was just younger and kind, that I was just lonely. But then there was the afternoon of the storm. The Hudson Valley rain slamming the windows so hard the power flickered. And Anna had stayed later than usual finishing the kitchen cabinets. And I offered her tea because the buses were delayed, and she accepted without hesitation. Sitting at the small table with her hair damp against her cheek, steam rising between us. And she told me she once studied nursing in Mexico but left to send money back when her mother fell ill, and I said Evelyn was grading papers late. And neither of us commented on the fact that we were speaking as if time had stretched just for us. What caught me was not beauty in the glossy magazine sense. Anna had crow's feet that deepened when she laughed, her hands were rough from bleach and scrubbing, but the way she noticed small things, the chip in the mug I gave her, the stack of unopened mail near the fridge, the photograph of Evelyn and me at Coney Island years ago, my arm slung stiffly around my wife as if we were siblings. She asked if I missed the ocean, and I admitted I hadn't been back since, and she said, softly, "People forget water is patient, it erodes even the hardest stone if you leave it long enough." That sentence lodged in me like a hook. And when the lights flickered out completely and the house went dark except for the dull gray of storm clouds, I felt her hand brush mine on the table, quick, uncertain, but enough to spark something I had buried. The next week I found myself waiting for her shifts, timing my errands so I could come back while she was still in the house, inventing reasons to speak with her. Did she know how to remove coffee stains from linen? Could she help carry the boxes to the attic? Could she translate a line of Spanish I saw on a note left by the previous owners? She obliged, always polite, but there was a flicker in her eyes when our hands touched. A shared recognition we pretended not to name. Evelyn noticed nothing, or perhaps chose not to. She was consumed with grading. With faculty meetings, with the constant complaints about budget cuts. And our conversations had shrunk to logistics, what groceries we needed, when the car needed servicing, whether we should visit her sister for Thanksgiving. One evening she mentioned she might increase Anna's hours since the house looked better than it had in years, and I agreed too quickly, betraying myself, but she only smiled with relief. The line I crossed came quietly. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day people forget. And Anna was dusting the bookshelf where my father's Bible sat untouched. And I made a joke about how it probably had more dust than the Declaration of Independence. And she laughed hard enough to drop the rag, and when I bent to pick it up we were too close. The air too charged, and I kissed her without planning, without thought. A kiss that tasted of furniture polish and nerves. And for a heartbeat she kissed back before pulling away, whispering, "You're married." As if I could possibly have forgotten. I should have stopped, begged forgiveness, fired her, anything to cut it clean. But instead I told her I hadn't felt alive in years. That Evelyn and I were ghosts moving through the same rooms, and she shook her head, muttering that I was just lonely, that men always mistook loneliness for love. But the next time she came, she didn't step back when my hand brushed her wrist. That was the beginning, the line blurred into a path. And though part of me screamed about vows and sins and the years I had built with Evelyn, another part insisted I deserved to feel warmth before I grew old. That maybe vows weren't broken in one shattering moment but in countless small neglects. I told myself this was temporary, a distraction, a foolish man's indulgence. But even as I thought it I knew I was lying. Because when Anna looked at me across the dim hallway with that thread bracelet dangling from her arm I felt claimed, as if she had already stepped into the cracks of my marriage and made them her own. The days after that first kiss unfolded like a secret map only two people could read, and though we tried to act as though nothing had shifted, the air between us was heavy with something neither of us named. A tension that hummed louder than the vacuum cleaner she pushed across the living room carpet. Louder than the weather reports on the kitchen radio. Louder even than my own conscience whispering of vows and promises. I told myself I could manage it. That if I simply pretended well enough the truth would remain hidden. But pretending has its limits, and my body betrayed me every time Anna brushed past carrying a stack of folded towels, the scent of soap clinging to her hair. She started leaving little traces. Maybe intentionally or maybe because she wanted me to notice. A glass placed slightly askew on the counter as if she knew I would straighten it. A Spanish proverb written on the corner of the notepad we kept for grocery lists. Her laughter echoing down the stairwell longer than necessary when I tried to joke about my clumsy hands. Evelyn remained blind, or perhaps she was exhausted enough not to care. Spending late nights at her desk with a red pen in hand, papers scattered like fallen leaves. Her patience worn thin by students who confused Whitman with Frost and begged for extensions they hadn't earned. When she collapsed into bed beside me she smelled of chalk dust and dry shampoo, and I found myself turning away. Ashamed, not because of what I was doing with Anna but because I was no longer capable of wanting the woman who had once been my entire life. The affair began with small touches. Anna's hand resting on mine a moment too long when I passed her a rag. The brush of her hip as she squeezed past me in the narrow pantry. And one afternoon when the sun slanted through the blinds painting stripes across her face, she whispered, "We shouldn't," but she didn't step back when I leaned in. And our mouths found each other with a hunger that felt both new and inevitable. After that day she began to linger, no longer rushing to catch the bus. And I drove her home once, twice, until it became routine. Until sitting in the car outside her apartment building felt more like home than my own kitchen table. She told me about her daughter back in Veracruz. About the way she saved every spare dollar for school books. And I listened with a reverence I hadn't shown Evelyn in years. Realizing that Anna's life was stitched together by sacrifice while mine had been padded with complacency. The more I knew, the deeper I sank. And soon I was memorizing the rhythm of her voice, the tiny scar on her chin. The way she always crossed herself before entering our house as if even cleaning demanded a prayer. Guilt did not arrive as a thunderclap but as a slow drizzle, seeping into the cracks of my days, and I found myself overcompensating with Evelyn. Making her tea in the evenings, asking about her students. Even suggesting we take a weekend trip to the coast. Ideas that startled her but never materialized because she was buried in essays and I was buried in lies. Nights became impossible. I lay awake listening to the tick of the clock. Imagining Anna's hands, Anna's laughter, Anna's body pressed against mine. While Evelyn's steady breathing beside me became a wall I could not climb. The secrecy made me reckless. I began inventing errands during Anna's shifts. Slipping into the spare bedroom where she dusted shelves. Pulling her close with the desperation of a drowning man, and she resisted at first. Muttering about sin and betrayal, but each time I begged. And each time she yielded a little more until the house itself seemed to conspire with us. Doors closing softly, shadows stretching long, silence covering us like a blanket. The turning point came the evening Evelyn announced she had invited colleagues over for dinner. A small gathering to celebrate the end of the semester. And she asked Anna to help prepare the house. I should have panicked, should have realized the danger of mixing those worlds. But instead I felt a thrill at the idea of Anna moving among our friends and neighbors as if she belonged, her hands setting the table while I poured wine. A secret pulse between us invisible to everyone else. That night Anna wore a plain blue dress I had never seen before. One that clung to her shoulders in a way that made it impossible for me to concentrate on anything Evelyn's colleagues were saying. And when she leaned past me to place a dish on the table, our eyes met for a fraction too long. Nobody noticed, at least I thought nobody noticed, but later as we cleared plates Evelyn remarked that Anna had been unusually quiet, and I laughed it off, saying perhaps she was shy around strangers. I could feel Anna's tension across the room, the way she avoided my gaze. And when I finally walked her to the door she whispered, "You're playing with fire," before slipping out into the night. She was right, of course, but the fire was already spreading, and I was not ready to douse it. Over the following weeks our encounters grew bolder. I brought her small gifts, a scarf, a box of chocolates, a second-hand novel I thought she might like, and she accepted them reluctantly. Always reminding me that she came to clean, not to be courted, yet her eyes softened each time, betraying her words. Evelyn grew busier with summer school sessions, leaving the house empty for hours. And Anna and I filled that emptiness with whispers and hurried embraces. Always half afraid of discovery, always half wishing for it, because hiding had begun to feel unbearable. One afternoon, while she was ironing Evelyn's blouses, Anna stopped and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. equal parts longing and fear, and she said, if she finds out it will destroy you. And I wanted to tell her that I was already destroyed. That vows can fracture long before they shatter. But instead I kissed her to silence the truth neither of us wanted to admit. The guilt pressed harder. In church on Sunday I could not meet the pastor's eyes. The hymns felt like accusations. I began drinking more whiskey late at night to drown the noise in my head, and Evelyn noticed. Asking if work was stressing me, if I was worried about money, and I nodded. Grateful for the excuses she offered me. Each lie was another thread tightening around my throat. Yet even as I drowned in deceit I could not let Anna go. The danger became part of the addiction, each stolen moment a reminder that I was alive. Each brush of her skin proof that I had not yet turned to stone. And still, deep down, I knew we were hurtling towards something irreversible. That no secret stays buried forever. What I did not know then was how cruelly fate would reveal us. How one careless slip would turn our private fire into a blaze that consumed everything.